should be part of the government. It should be a private enterprise which is tasked with this. Why do I feel like that? Personally, I believe in small government, less intrusion from the government side. Anytime government takes over this thing, if you fail to do it, there's a penalty. That instead of people voluntarily doing something, you're now forced to do something, which doesn't engender full 100% cooperation from people who are really keen on conserving this planet. And towards that, I believe this plant is needed, but let's examine whether it's a best way to do it is through government or a private enterprise handling this. Both present a set of challenges, but I believe the private enterprise may be a better answer. Thank you.
So following along those same lines, what will you do to reduce the negative environmental and financial impacts, such as air pollution and road damage, from multiple trash collection trucks going through the same routes around the city every week? Wonderful.
I believe in low government, less intrusive government. I don't think city is the answer. In the subdivision which I'm in, we have about 150 houses. We have only 1 day of trash collection. And that is because our HOA has negotiated with the trash companies to come only on one particular day. I believe if you allow individuals to choose, firstly, they do not have enough bargaining power. If suppose somebody doesn't take it, doesn't miss it, an individual really is going against a company of Republic or Waste Management of India. They're not going to expect it to be so responsive. Whereas if an HOA says, we're going to drop you, then those people definitely will listen. If you move it to the government, that's another thing which the government takes over. And oftentimes government is even more or less responsive, I feel. Thank you.
Okay, Cassandra. What would you do to reduce the negative environmental and financial impact, such as air pollution and road damage, from multiple trash collection trucks going through the same routes around the city every week?
So I think this is a good discussion because it's an issue that we're beginning to hear more and more about. The number of people who are concerned about the number of trash collections in their neighborhood, where I personally think government has its purpose and don't think that government should be in all of our business. I do think there is opportunity where we can look at how do we, if we can properly fund a trash service where we can benefit the majority of our citizens, especially when you're talking about going into these small neighborhoods, I think it's worth the discussion. And I think it's something that our Johns Creek community really needs to voice what their thoughts are with our city council, not just waiting for the new council to come in, but begin to address it with this council, because day one, when the new council is elected, we're going to have our marching orders for the most part. And so I would like to hear from more of the community and your neighborhoods, what is the issue you're seeing that's bothering you the most or not regarding the multiple services that are coming in and out of your community. And so it's definitely something that I think that our discussions with our residents can help give us some marching orders on how we need to address it.
Thank you. Moving on now to contracted vendors. There's a preamble before the question. The new Town Park Amphitheatre, which is a relatively new structure, has to be rebuilt. In 2018, the residents witnessed an attempt to shrink the size of the lanes on Route 141 under the pretense of safety, only to be found that this was an attempt to build a 6-lane highway. Just 2 examples of what the contracted Public Works Department, run by Jacobs Engineering, has done. Does this seem to be a conflict of interest to what the residents want? Why are we the only North Fulton County still using a contracted department? And what would you aim to do if elected?
Well, first of all, I would aim to get all the information. I've been hearing about this, but it seems, I don't know what's political, what's what. I do know that we've had some failure at Newtown, and but the first thing I would do was gather all of the information to see what happened, to see what was done to hold contractors accountable. But I think anytime we're working with developers or contractors of any kind, we can't tie ourselves to eternity relationship. And if we find that we've been rendered a bad service, or we have not been giving the truth and there wasn't transparency, then we should make a decision not to do business with those individuals. But not having all of the details surrounding the concerns here, I would like the opportunity to gather more information, but I do think that I could tell you if someone came to my house and I've been having a lot of work done and they provided me a poor service, or they were dishonest with me, in which I recently had the experience about cost or anything else, I would choose not to do business with them. And so I think that our city deserves the same.
Bob, shall I read the question?
Yes.
Okay. The Newtown Park Amphitheatre, which is a relatively new structure, has to be rebuilt. In 2018, the residents witnessed an attempt to shrink the size of the lanes on Route 141 under the pretense of safety, only to find that this was an attempt to build a 6-lane highway. Just 2 examples of what the contracted Public Works Department, run by John Jacobs Engineering, has done. Does this seem to be a conflict of interest to what the residents want? Why are we the only North Fulton city still using a contracted department? And if elected, what would you try and do about this?
Yes, I think Ms. Cassandra articulated the issue very well. We need to have more facts on this issue. But here is what, let's lay down what are the pros and cons of having a private contractor, right? Jacobs, to mention a particular contractor, they have the expertise in public service. They have collaboration since they can synergize with other cities where they are contracting. These are a couple of examples. Also, when you find any person we are entering into a contract, we need to find out what is their service level agreement. Are they providing services in line with what the city needs? If not, we reevaluate. Jacobs, as of now, is a private entity. They have a duty both to the city as well as to their corporation. If we find them not doing or living up to their expectation, then we should revisit. Let's talk about the cons of it. We had another company which was checking code enforcement. Good for the previous city council. These guys fired them because they displayed very bad behavior in the sense they were writing citations, because more citations they write, more revenue for the company. At this point, I have no hesitation in saying, consultants, bring expertise to the table. If we have it in-house, yes, then we can evaluate whether we should keep it in-house or outsource it to a consultant. Thank you.
Okay, moving on now to talk about the police. With the issues addressing policing throughout the nation last year, what are your positions on the current state of the Johns Creek Police Force, the police chief, and the training of the officers?
Okay. I think that's really a great question. I believe deterioration in law and order seriously impacts our lifestyle, quality of life, property values. Everything is predicated upon public safety, which is mostly ensured by the folks who wear the blue. Notwithstanding it, as in any organization, you will find some folks who are not living up to the standards. Those people, in case we're looking at this building, if this window is leaking air, I'll replace that window. If all these windows are leaking air, I'll replace or retrain the whole windows. But I don't tear down the whole house. That's where I come from. I believe there was a shooting in Minneapolis about 6-7 years back in a Hindu temple where a white police officer went in and shot the intruder, but that intruder already killed 6 people. So this is a place where you see how the police jumps into action. That policeman was risking his life. He didn't know how many intruders were there in the temple. But this is day to day, every day they do this. So I don't believe that they should be handcuffed or shackled so that they will not act in a defensive manner. I believe that they are smart. They should not delay their action or response time because of our views about them. And that is my priority, to make sure the police are never dragged over hot coals for any minor infractions. As I said, if there is anything wrong, we will seriously address it. But we can't tear down the whole establishment because there's so much of trust in this institution. Thank you very much.
Okay, Cassandra. With the issues addressing policing throughout the nation last year, what are your positions on the current state of the Johns Creek Police Force, the police chief, and training of the officers?
So this has been a very challenging year in our country. I happen to have met and talked with our new police chief. I happen to like him. Many of you who have not had the opportunity to go to one of the Coffee with the Cop meetings, I invite you to do so. You learn a lot about the changes that's happening within our police department, some of the new policies, the new body cameras, the new trainings that he is implementing. You know, in addition to the training to get into the academy, he's adding additional training. Explicit bias. You know, one of the things as we have this discussion, we have to own up to the reality that we've had real issues in this country when it comes to policing. And particularly so when it comes to African American and the brown community. Johns Creek is a very diverse city. What is it? The 10th diverse in the state of Georgia, if not the most diverse. And if we ignore the fact that we have to, none of us want to live in a lawless society. I certainly would never approve defunding the police. But I do believe that we have to make sure that and I think Johns Creek has done a great job of this, hiring the right people for Johns Creek and not turning away when we have issues surrounding policing. But if we're able to have the real discussions about what we see without turning on each other, then I think we can best address the issues as they arise in our city. And something may happen, but that doesn't mean that we turn on each other. That doesn't mean that we turn on the police, but that simply means that we allow a fair investigation to take its course, and that when there needs to be accountability, that we hold whomever accountable. Thank you.
Okay, and continuing on that theme, a very specific question. What are your thoughts about the use of deadly force by police officers? When a suspect suddenly points a gun at a police officer, do you believe the officer is justified in using deadly force?
I'm going to stay seated. I think there are times there's justification. We all deserve, and definitely our policemen who are there to serve and protect us deserve the right to defend themselves. I mean, we're not talking, this isn't a cowboy and Indian game. They're out there doing real stuff. However, I do find it concerning when I look at the statistics and I find that there are higher records of police shootings among blacks than there are whites. And so where I certainly support, I support community police, and I support policemen who are out there jump roping and doing whatever they feel they need to do to get to know their community. But at the end of the day, we all want law enforcement who are there to do their job. And we want them armed and ready to do their jobs. However, that doesn't mean that the first part of doing your job is always pulling the trigger. You know, there are other ways that I'm happy to hear that other tools that police officers are being given that they can protect themselves as the first response before pulling their weapon out. But I do agree that if I was put in a harmful situation or a dangerous situation, I have the right to protect myself, and so do they. I just think we need to make sure that the proper training is in place and that officers get to know their community so that there is equity and the same force in situations that are the same without us continuing to see the demographics or the statistics of disproportionate number of weapons being pulled on African American communities and brown communities compared to others. Thank you.
Bob, what are your thoughts about the use of deadly force by police officers? When a suspect suddenly points a gun at a police officer, do you believe the officer is justified in using deadly force?
In the previous incident, when I said the policeman jumped into the temple and rescued so many people, defensive, unarmed people, that happened because that man instinctively responded. In Johns Creek Police Department is trained in so many ways. They are supposed to pass 469 conditions to get CALIA certified. Now this is something enviable. Roswell, Sandy Springs, Atlanta, they are losing police officers. We have a waiting list which says Johns Creek Police Department is doing a fabulous job and people want to come and be employed here. As we speak, there are about 7 people in the pipeline wanting employment. And if you recall, 2-3 weeks back, 3 more fresh people were included into the police force. That brings our total almost to 94. So I believe Johns Creek Police Department per se is really doing a great job. And I think when it comes to use of deadly force, one of the training they receive is to watch out for the second shooter. Because most of the time these encounters happen in the middle and dark of the night, where this policeman doesn't have the benefit to know whether he's being called for an encounter or being ambushed. So they are trained to immobilize the person. Oftentimes the biggest area is the upper part of the body, therefore it also results. But remember, he doesn't have like Monday morning quarterback to find out could I have done better. He has to react in a split second because he's always worried about the second shooter. And I believe we need to recognize that, and we should not allow the police to feel defenseless in such situations. I think body camera is a great measure for them. They feel there's an advocate for them with that body camera. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to taxes. What are your thoughts on the current taxes collected by the City of Johns Creek, and would you work to make any changes to it in the future, and why?
I think a lot of thought has gone into this. When we are talking about city taxation rate, we are talking about millage rate, which has been held at 3.986 for the last few years. Earlier on, it had gone up above 4 because some people over-enthusiastically reduced it, dropped it to 3.60. I think the current city council, which has been in place for the last 4 years, have done a great job, not only being a great stewards of the money, they also, at that rate, managed to get almost $2.5 million surplus in the kitty. So I don't believe that we should drop the rate or increase the rate. I think we should hold it steady, and this is, imagine another pandemic, 3rd wave, 4th wave, we are now not too sure what's going to happen with our healthcare. Therefore, it is imperative that we have some certain financial cushion for such eventuality. And I think I rest my case.
Cassandra, what are your thoughts on the current taxes collected by the City of Johns Creek, and would you make any changes to it in the future, and why?
Well, I'm happy that Johns Creek decided not to, although we had to advertise it as a tax increase, we actually didn't change our taxes, although Fulton County rolled theirs back. I'm happy about that. However, I think that we're going to have to start thinking about how do we stabilize our taxes without doing some real development. And development doesn't have to be an ugly word, but we got to think, how do we grow our tax digest? You guys are pretty astute here. The average person doesn't think about the fact that your taxes help to maintain your city, you know, where we're not continuing to borrow and borrow, because we're going to have to pay all that money back that we're borrowing. And so we have to, in order to maintain our taxes, we have to simultaneously figure out how we're going to continue to grow our tax digest so that we can keep our taxes stable, because I don't think any of us want to continue paying higher taxes. And so I appreciate the fact that Johns Creek still does have one of the lowest tax rates around. However, if we're not pouring back into this tax digest with our small businesses, local new development, and other ways, then we're going to, at some point, have to make some decisions. And I hope that I'm not part of that team that has to make that decision, because I think we can prevent having to raise our taxes by doing other type of smart development.
And there's a very specific question here about taxes. Can you give an example of where the taxpayers of apartments help the schools or communities at the same degree that families that have moved to the suburbs and are paying for a single family home?
Can you ask that question again, please?
Yeah. Can you give an example of where the taxpayers of apartments help the schools or the community to the same degree that families that have moved to single family homes would contribute?
So that question kind of saddens me in a sense, because I think we take away value from people who live in apartments. The fact that they do pay taxes here, they shop here, they grocery shop, however, of course, that we as homeowners understand that our property, just by the mere fact of being property owners, we're pouring definitely a much healthier sum back into the tax digest. So there's a vast difference of homeownership and whether I live in an apartment, but I think there is some contribution that we have to consider, that apartments provide living for folks who choose to live in apartments, and by them driving, putting gas, shopping in the grocery stores, retails, eating in the restaurants, and those kinds of things, they are contributing back into the tax digest. And so not at the same degree that we as property owners do, you know, and so and I understand why we wouldn't want to overdevelop our community with a lot of apartments, but we must also see the value in folks who live in apartments and what they contribute back to our tax digest.
Okay, Bob.
I believe there's fundamentally a difference between an apartment. If you own the apartment, it's fine. If you rent in the apartment, there's a difference whether you own a single family residence, because then you have skin in the game. If I own the apartment, I have skin in the game. I'm a stakeholder in the city. I also contribute then, irrespective. If you live in Manhattan, you'll have high taxes. If you live in Atlanta, Buckhead, you'll have high taxes. That depends on, it's inevitable that people in apartment will pay less taxes than single family residences. But I don't want to demonize them for that. But what I want to tell them is, if they are owning that apartment, that is a separate issue. Why vis-a-vis if they are renting there. If you look at it, most of your HOAs, I don't think that's a major issue here. In my HOA, it is almost completely banned from having any renters there, because primarily they are not as involved because they think they're transiting, and whereas if you are owning that apartment, certainly you'd like to put a garden there, you'd like to take care of the place, and you are more responsive civically. I remember when I stayed in the apartment, I never voted in any election because I knew I'll be there only for 6 months. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to COVID. Would you enforce a mask mandate, a vaccine mandate?
Why didn't I expect this question earlier? Here's what I feel. Anytime you mandate, it engenders lower cooperation. I come from a healthcare background. In my office, everyone wears a mask, everyone is inoculated, primarily because we encounter a lot of COVID patients. But by the same token, city council people do not encounter so many people who are afflicted with this virus. And next thing is, let's look at the labor shortage. Southwest Airlines is virtually having a mutiny there because they enforced a vaccine mandate. Nobody's talking about it, but many people have struck work. Imagine if that were to happen in our city halls. See how our services will be crippled. So we have to understand vaccination is between patient and a doctor. There are several conditions which preclude actively taking a vaccine. Personally, I believe vaccine worked for me. I was in India. I was exposed to Delta variant for 7 times. 7 times my PCR came negative. I believe I'm thankful to be an American and I was using an American product. But my point to wind up, this is something which I educate, inform, but I'd rather leave the choice to the individual because it is extremely unique to that individual. Thank you.
Okay, Cassandra, would you enforce a mask mandate, a vaccine mandate?
Well, COVID has become such a huge public health crisis. To answer that in short, yes. The same way we enforce seatbelt laws. You know, I remember the time, Deja may not, but I remember the time when we didn't have to wear seatbelts. And seatbelts became mandatory because seatbelts were found to save lives. So I think for myself, but I follow the science. I trust the people that we pay a whole lot of money to look at overall the health conditions of our country and the advice that they give us. And so until we get this under wraps and so that no one else has to die or overcrowd our hospitals and put our healthcare workers under great stress, I sure would. And I also, you know, I see business after business, including Bob said that his business as a healthcare provider, they mandate that everyone wears masks in their business, and that it's not only to protect his workers, and I respect that, but also to protect the patients. So I think, yes, as a healthcare, a public health crisis, to get it under control, I think that we need to mandate whatever measures, since we don't seem to have acted on our own accord to getting this thing where it needs to be, then hopefully something can be done that we can stop people from dying and children from being hospitalized. But long term, no, I don't even like wearing the mask, but I do it because I believe that it's the responsible thing to do.
Okay, thank you. Moving now to performing arts. In the town centre, it's proposed to have a performing arts community centre built with a minimum cost of $52 million. It has been stated that even after the Performing Arts Centre is open, it would require a minimum of 60% city funding annually to just keep the doors open. What is your position on the funding of not only the construction cost, but also the year-over-year cost to keep the centre open, as well as future maintenance costs?
Thank you for that question, Anne. So yes, I support the Legacy Center. I believe it will bring value to our community, and for those of us who appreciate the arts, it is a way that can, I think, unify us as a community, because universally the arts seem to bring people together in a way that other things don't. And so as far as the cost of it, of course, I think we'll have to continue to look for financing, whether through grant or private partnership. But I certainly would like to see the